And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Big episode in store for you guys today as we are just give or take 48 hours away from Oregon football's 2023 spring game. So there's plenty of stuff to talk about. And joining me on today's episode is my guy, Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Pac-12. What's going on, brother?
I got puddles on my heart today. Quite literally. He is in the window. He is on my heart. Couldn't be feeling better, man. I'm going to have to watch the spring game on tape delay like it's 2007 because I have broadcasting duties on Saturday afternoon, which is unfortunate timing. But gosh, I'm so ready to watch some football. So many different things to watch for.
Man, yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I know we were talking about this before we got on air. We're live on YouTube and on Twitter, at MTorres Sports on Twitter, at Oregon Football Max Torres on YouTube. And I was just telling you, man, like my head's spinning. Like it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. 5 transfers in the last 24 hours. Ducks got a new commitment from Melissa tight end Jackson Ford out of Texas. Got that news and a one-on-one interview with him over on my site. So check that out. But so much is happening. I'm boarding a flight myself to Texas, oddly enough, tomorrow morning. And I'm going to be missing the spring game, which is a bummer. But, dude, it's just a crazy time in the Oregon football world right now.
Yeah, it is. We're all kind of getting ready for the game. And then the news comes out like, oh, yeah, these 3 guys are leaving all at the same time. Darren Barkins, Harrison Taggart, and Sir Mel's all leaving the program. There have been others, Avante Dickerson leaving as well. And I don't think they're catastrophic losses for the Ducks. I've just kind of described them as scholarship casualties. It doesn't mean they aren't, decently talented players in one way or another. I think it's just when you recruit this many good players, you're going to have some guys who did have potential, who did have upside, not be able to crack the depth chart, and they'll go try and figure out how they can find a destination. Hopefully they do that allows them to flourish on the football field. But no, I think Oregon's fine. This was expected at some level. I don't think I didn't go through and just because it felt unnecessarily negative and go through and be like, these are the guys who should transfer. These guys should leave, because then it sounds like I'm talking bad about them when I wouldn't be meaning to and whatnot. But I think really it's just a function of Oregon was in a situation where they had too many players on the roster. We talked about it many times, right? I mean, a lot of people were really concerned about this sort of stuff. And I just like to go back to my take on it, which is you have an entire staff of people. It's not just a head coach, a coordinator, and some assistants. You have a director of player personnel. You have a recruiting coordinator. You have a chief of staff. You have entire groups whose jobs it is to manage the roster, identify talent, get them to the coaches, and all that sort of stuff, and manage this thing. And, Oregon fans are worried for a while. Well, how are we going to get down to, 85 scholarships by the fall? I'm pretty sure we're down to 82 right now. So now we're in a position where Oregon could actually add 3 transfers and still be at that 85 or under limit, as spring football kind of winds down here with the spring game on Saturday. And school is almost, I don't remember when school ends at Oregon because
like June, mid-June, I think.
Mid-June. Are they in quarters? Oh, they're on quarters. Yeah. Oh, they're on quarters. Quarter system for the win. Yeah. Fun fact: I didn't go to Oregon. Been a fan my whole life, but I did not go there. Max didn't go to Oregon either, so it's okay.
Yeah, I did. What are you talking about?
Well, you describe yourself as a Gonzaga Bulldog,
but I got my master's at Oregon, so I went to Oregon. Come on.
Okay.
Now.
Yeah. You went there more than me. Okay. So Max is more of a diehard than me.
Oregon.
Max is clearly more of a true Duck than me. That's what. That's what we're learning here, except I will point out only one of us is wearing a T-shirt that's got puddles on it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to leave that discussion at that point. But no, I think at some move, or at some level, these moves made sense. Guys who really weren't seeing the field. I didn't think we were going to crack the rotation. I still think the most shocking departure in the last month or so is Keith Brown. And going back to this entire portal cycle, I think the other surprising transfer was Maliki Matavao, who I would feel a lot better if Oregon had Matavao at this point in time. But overall, this is kind of the way it goes. You have a lot of turnover, and now we get to finally see the on-field product on Saturday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's the focus of today's show. But little intro bit on the crazy portal action. It was expected. That the Ducks needed
Had to happen.
to cut down on numbers, and that's just kind of how the game works. But with that being said, Spencer, let's kind of turn our attention to Saturday. Spring game set for 107 kickoff, I believe, over on Pac-12 Network. If you're not able to make it out to Autzen, if you are going to Autzen, remember to bring some canned food for Food for Lane County. Kind of an annual tradition over there in
Yep.
Eugene. But we're going to be talking about some of the top storylines today going into the spring game, kind of some guys we're going to be on the lookout for, what we're excited about. And I think we can kind of just open this up broadly, Spencer. But for me, let's start on the Will Stein offense. I think that right now, granted, it's going to be super vanilla. We know that. That's what every spring game looks like. But Will Stein has some pretty big shoes to fill because, Kenny Dillingham came, even though it was just a year. Man, he lit that Oregon offense on fire. Really, I'd say the easiest way to sum it up is that he made the offense fun to watch again because the Ducks were putting up points with Mario Cristobal and Joe Moorhead Arroyo, what have you, but it wasn't really fun to watch. Ground and pound and then ground and pound some more. So there's so many explosive weapons that have been added. Stein's been touted as, an up-and-coming coach. He's had some really good stops. Had a great year last year at UTSA. So I think with all the weapons that the Ducks have added and the momentum that they have on that side of the ball, Bo Nix back for his 5th year, I think that it's pretty exciting to see what he's going to be able to draw up and how he's going to get these guys involved.
Yeah, he's certainly got an array of weapons, right? You got a 5th-year quarterback. I mean, what a great situation for a first-year OC to come into, right? Dillingham had this last year, of course, a quarterback he was familiar with. He had a great offensive line. He had good weapons. And I think he, for the most part, made the most of that offensive unit. But, Will Stein has also got a pretty stocked cupboard, right? You have Bo Nix in year 2 in Oregon. He's already got chemistry with several of guys who will be his top targets in the passing game: Troy Franklin, Chris Hudson, Terrence Ferguson, the running backs as well. You have to deal with some offensive line change, but is the talent there to be good? Yep, there absolutely is. There'll be some bumps and some lapses at times, but overall they should still be a plus unit compared to the rest of the Pac-12. And you just look at the running backs in particular that he's got to deal with. And, we know Dan Lanning likes to run the football. He's talked about that. Most defensive coaches do. And Oregon ran the football a lot last year. Like, make no mistake about it. Like, I don't have the numbers in front of me on how many run plays Oregon ran in 2021 versus 2022, but I'd be willing to bet it's more similar than people think. Like, Oregon ran the ball a really, really high percentage of the time last year. They just introduced the play action shot game. They took passes down the field. They didn't keep everything contained, conservative, and safe. And, the new OC is a part of that, and Bo Nix was a part of that as well. New OC, no quarterback from the prior year. So I think all of that is a great place for Stein to be, that you've got Troy Franklin, who could be a first-team All-Pac-12 wide receiver, Ferguson, who is an All-Pac-12 caliber tight end, who you got a bunch of other talented weapons. You got Trayshawn Holden. You got Jurion Dickey coming in. You got Tez Johnson in the portal. Your running backs lineup is probably – it's probably as deep as it's ever been. And this is a school in Oregon we've always had good running backs. Like, if you think about the worst set of running backs Oregon's had in the last decade or so, it's probably in that 2017-18 range, when it was like Kenai Benoit, Tony Brooks James. And by the way, I'm not saying those are bad players, because that's my point. They most definitely were not, but you didn't have like an all-timer in there necessarily. Or Royce Freeman was actually in that.
Royce was, I was going to say,
Royce was in there.
He kind of was an all-timer.
Yeah, was literally an all-timer. And, before Royce was there, or when Royce was there, Thomas Tyner was also there, and Tyner was really, really good. DeAnthony, Lamike, like, they've just had so many good players. And I think, you don't have necessarily an all-timer at the top, but your depth is ridiculous here. Like, I think Jordan James can be Noah Whittington. I think their body types, their movements, running style is all very similar. And you go Bucky Irving to Noah Whittington to Jordan James, and a couple of 4-star freshmen, especially with Dante Dowdell, who have a lot of hype coming in. I think the running backs room is as secure as you could possibly have. I think they can survive injuries. They could survive just needing to get different styles in there, different body types. Like, I think have got everything you could really hope for in that sense. So I think he's got everything that he needs to succeed, and now he's just got to show us that he does have the coaching chops to compete at the Power 5 level.
Yeah, and you mentioned the offensive line, which is going to be a group that I'm very interested to see on Saturday or whenever I get around to watching the highlights, like you and I were talking about. But there's a couple of kind of storylines within that, right? With the way that the spring game is divided, we got yellow team and green team. Announced the rosters yesterday. Marcus Mariota and Javon Holland, the guest coaches for those. But one of the points that comes with that is that you're not going to have all of your top guys on the same side of the ball. So that's going to make it kind of a little bit more tough to get a good read on where the group is at. And then you're also dealing with some injuries, right? Marcus Harper the second is kind of out indefinitely right now. Some of the buzz that I'm hearing right now from people around the program is that it's looking like he'll be back in time for fall camp, which is good. But that's one of your two top candidates to take over at center for Alex Forsyth, who moves on after a really, really good career at Oregon. Probably one of the best centers in the Pac-12. Just football IQ is crazy. I know you've talked about that on your show, Spencer. So at least for now, for the time being, it looks like Jackson Powers Johnson's kind of in the driver's seat with that competition, strictly because of availability, and he's a really talented player in his own right. But who's going to take some snaps there? Maybe it's going to be Yapani Laululu. Maybe we'll see him take some snaps. We got to see if Junior Angelau is going to be available, the Texas transfer that came in from the portal this past season. Dan Lenny was asked about him and his availability earlier this week, and didn't indicate whether he was going to be playing or not. Still working back. I was hearing that he was kind of getting more action in spring practice this week, but still kind of limited. So that group should be pretty solid. And you got Connerly and Ajani Cornelius in that group, and some really talented
Jones
guys.
Back too.
Stephen Jones is back. So you got some really good pieces there, but they're going to be on other opposite sides. So it's going to be kind of hard to take that for too much. But some of the guys that I'm looking forward to seeing on the offensive side of the ball, Spencer, you talked about it, the transfers, Trayshawn Holden, who comes over from Alabama, and then Tez Johnson. Everybody who I've talked to about Tez, speed, and more speed. So I'm excited to see that on display on Saturday. I know he's kind of a lighter guy, but they're saying that he kind of just has a different gear than the rest of the receivers in that room. So it's a pretty talented room at wide receiver under Junior Adams, and I think Tez Johnson's going to go out there and try to make a statement and say, hey, this is what all the hype's about, and understandably so.
Yeah, it's one of the most, really, you touched on two of the most compelling position battles that we've discussed throughout the spring, and we'll see materialize at some level in the spring game. There was even a rumor a while back that Sir Mells was going to play offensive line, but he'd moved back to the D line, but he's transferred out now. So, I think the offensive line still has plenty of depth. I think the defensive line as well has still got plenty of depth, but where guys are actually going to play on the O-line still kind of up in the air. Like Connerly, they've raved about him in spring practice. He was one of the top offensive tackles in the class of 2022. He played in that 14J package last year. Was he number one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like he has all the makings of being your starting left tackle. But Johnny Cornelius is not some scrub transfer from Rhode Island who they added as a depth piece. He was wanted by Alabama and other top school. Everybody wanted that guy. And Oregon ended up getting him. So I would suspect you see Connerly at left tackle and Cornelius at right come September 2nd against Portland State. But is there a guarantee there? No, I don't think so. And then, the Marcus Harper to center conversation, which has emerged in spring football, and we won't get to see, of course, because Harper is being held out for precautionary reasons with an injury. That is one that I didn't expect to see. I thought it was JPJ and, who's going to be the backup? Who do we know? And then we hear that Harper might be pushing him for the starting center job, but JPJ is a really good offensive lineman. So if you slid Harper over to center, JPJ's got to be one of your guards, right? But then you've got Angelau and you've got Stephen Jones. So I think there's a lot of different combinations on the offensive line that could work out successfully for the Ducks. And then the slot receiver position, probably in addition to the number 2 corner slot, the most up in the air individual position battle. I'm curious if you think there's a bigger one out there. I don't see it. I think you've probably got Triquez Bridges as one of your one of your top corners, but I don't know what to expect from Kyrie Jackson. Can Dante Manning take a step? Jaleel Florence was impressive as a true freshman. I'm sure they'll all play, but in terms of who your top 2 cornerbacks are, I don't know who number 2 is, but I still think at slot receiver, Chris Hudson has been a good football player the last few years. He's not been just okay or just, solid or has had his moments or shown potential. No, he's been a good football player. He's a good blocker. He's physical. I know he had the big drop last year against Cal, came back in that game, by the way, made a bunch of really, really big plays. And he can get you yardage on a screen pass. He can run intermediate routes. He can go down the field. He's been really good for the Ducks. And then now you introduce Tez Johnson, and I think it's just an embarrassment of riches for the Ducks that you can rotate these guys in and out. You get a little bit different styles. Tez has got more high-end speed, like you talked about. Hudson is a little bit more physical. Like, I don't know what Tez's run block capability is going to be, which, I'm not saying we go back to the Mario Cristobal offense here or anything, but I know it's a sore spot for people. But wide receivers always have to be able to block. And Hudson, from what I've seen from him, is a good blocker. And I just wonder how that balance works out. But curious as to your thoughts on the slot receivers position.
Yeah, the slot receiver position's an interesting battle, and I definitely want to get over to defense. Spencer, I know you got about 30 for you total. But yeah, it's an interesting spot because I think when we got into the offseason and saw all the movement at the position, I was kind of like, I wasn't saying that the Ducks were thin there, but it was just a little bit kind of up in the air about, which pieces are going to be able to step forward, and what's his room look like. But after some transfers come in, Ducks are looking like they're the leader for Gary Bryant, the former USC wide receiver. So how does he slide into the mix if they end up getting him? Commitment set for May 13th, I believe, by the way. But yeah, I think Chris Hudson has done a lot of really good stuff for Oregon. It's just a question of, how much better is Tez Johnson, or how different of a player is he? And how do they look to kind of incorporate that speed? Because Troy Franklin's not slow. None of these guys are slow. I think that Kyrie Jackson was talking about Troy Franklin and kind of just, you wouldn't expect him to be able to move the way he does at about 6'3". So that's definitely I think that is the most interesting position battle, along with the number 2 corner, or just the cornerback room in general. We didn't really get a chance to talk about the tight end position. I know that's going to be one to watch on Saturday, because
we should get to see a lot of Kenyon Sadiq, the true freshman.
Yeah,
plenty. Because I'm pretty sure he's number 2 on the depth chart right now with T Ferg out with an injury, so he should be one of the starting tight ends.
Yeah, no, he definitely should be one of the starting tight ends. You got him and Patrick Herbert, and then maybe we'll see if Mateo gets rotated in there a little bit. I think a lot of fans, and I would kind of agree with them, say that they don't really want to see him at tight end because the need isn't there as much, and you kind of just want to see what he can unleash as a edge rusher or a defensive lineman wherever he ends up, getting situated. So there's a lot of interesting things to watch for on this on the offensive side of the ball. And then another one we didn't even talk about, but I wanted to squeeze in real quick before we get to the defense, is what does Ty Thompson look like? He's the number 2 quarterback right now. Everyone thinks, understandably so, that he's going to be the main backup, but how is he going to look? He's been at Oregon for 2 years now, entering his 3rd season. Hasn't quite been able to put it together, but what is he going to look like in the spring game? What's his processing speed going to look like? Is he going to be poised? Is he going to be able to keep the ball moving, the offense moving? So there's so much on offense, but we got to turn the page to defense, Spencer, before we run out of time here. And I think one of the most interesting things that we can kind of start this conversation with is Dan Lanning was asked earlier this week, I think it was Tuesday, what the biggest difference was from last year's team to this year's team, more or less paraphrasing. And he said physicality. That's what he's going to be looking for. He said that they're a lot more physical this spring than they were at this point last year. And I think a lot of people associate that with the defense. And, that's Lanning's hallmark. That's what he's going to hang his hat on. So I think the physicality has to be something we want to watch for. Obviously, you want to exit the game with no injuries. You want everyone to be totally healthy. But just seeing that physicality and then that D-line, man, that D-line is going to be fast is what I'm hearing. They're huge. They can, move really well. They're deep. So maybe let's start the defense there.
Yeah, I'm looking for basically improvement across the board on defense. Like, what was your one redeeming element? The run defense was good last year for the Ducks. Okay. But you've got new linebackers, and you do have returning interior defensive linemen. I think that's the group I'm least interested to see, because I kind of know what I have there already with Dorless and Casey Rogers and Popo, and I don't really know what we have with Popo coming off an injury. You never know. But Itaki Taimani, Keonwar Hudson, like go down the list. Okay, I understand what I've got there. But at edge, what does Mateo look like? Is Mace Funa, was that a flash in the pan of the Holiday Bowl, or is he a really, really good player now? I mean, he's been a good, solid player, but can he, show potential to take a step forward? And then Jordan Birch, of course, coming over from South Carolina, former 5-star recruit, grades as 4-star transfer on 24/7. He's a guy who we need to make an impact. Not when it would be nice, but like we need him to play at a high level. Linebackers. Is Jeffrey Bassa better in coverage? Does he have a better feel for the defense compared to last year? What does Justin Jacobs look like? Who are the other linebackers that step up? Is Connor Swelley from Arizona State a big-time player in that room? I got a lot of questions, a lot of things to watch. At the secondary, what's the safeties combination going to be? Because you've got Tysheem Johnson and Evan Williams, the transfers, but then you have Brian and by the way, Jamal Hill making the transfer down to linebacker. But you have the two transfers, but then I don't know why I'm using these two fingers. You have Brian Addison, you have Steve Stevens coming back in the safety room, right? You have some young guys as well. They're probably not going to see the field, come the fall. But Tyler Turner, Cody DeCamera, what can we see from those guys? I'm most interested there. But you can only put 3 safeties on the field at once. Who are the best safeties going to be? Is Steve Stevens' experience going to win out, or is he a guy who has been a starting caliber player, but not a high level starter? Is he someone who's going to get beat out for starting time? That's something to watch. And then we talked about the cornerback slots. I think you have Triquez Bridges at one starting corner, and then at the other one, I could legitimately make a case for it going any of 3 directions for who the starting number 2 corner is. And, the coaches see the stuff at practice all the time, and they'll, be formulating their own depth chart. But this is our opportunity to see what we think could happen here, because Jaleel Florence, if he takes a step forward, gets a little bit better in run defense, and I mean, that's really it. He was pretty darn good in coverage last year. Obviously, you can always improve. I could see him being a number 2 corner, because Dante Manning, he's the most gifted of the bunch athletically, but this is year 4. Does it take 4 years to make a jump, or is he just kind of is what he is at this point, a contributor but not a high-level player? And then Kyrie Jackson, don't have a lot of film on him from his time at Alabama. He was sought after coming out of community college, of course, to go to the Crimson Tide, but then had just an okay career. Like, there are just so many questions on the defense, and I'm really, really excited to see how they all pan out, because I want to watch every single level. I want to see how all this stuff looks. Are we going to be able to get better pressure on the quarterback? Are our linebackers going to be better in coverage? Are our safeties going to be able to make more impact plays? I think those are all things to watch for in the spring game on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a bunch of really good stuff, and we'll kind of try to break some more of that down here. Just to give some final thoughts on the D line, I think I was talking about how the O line is going to be broken up. So I mean, even though there's some uncertainty at O line, I'm not too worried about that. I'd say I'm more concerned or focused on the D line taking a step forward, specifically with the pass rush. So than I am the O line. I think they're going to figure that out. They got a lot of good pieces there. Guys who have played some good football, even if it hasn't been for Oregon. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm confident in Malik Terry, Kavanaugh to get that group right. But I just want to see those defensive linemen knocking guys back. Like, you just want to see violence at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's really what Oregon needs. Obviously, don't want anyone to get hurt. But, like, I just want to see this group play like they have their hair on fire, and really just kind of, take off and just really set the standard for what they're going to look like in 23. But let's go back a level, Spencer, and spend some more time on the backers, because that's a group that is really thin right now. Keith Brown transferred hit the portal just a couple days after saying, hey, I'm going to be at Oregon. I could have been a portal guy, but it means more to me. I'm from Oregon. You guys can go watch the presser. But that was a really surprising move as a guy who was pretty solidly in the 2 deep, I think, at the very least. But then Harrison Taggart leaves. He was a pretty highly sought after guy in the 22 class. Pretty small, though. I just don't know if he was physically ready to play college football at this level, as far as just from a physical standpoint. But wish that guy all the best after hitting the portal on Wednesday. But yeah, how does Justin Jacobs look? He was saying hopefully this is his last year of college football, and he's already being viewed by some outlets as a top draft prospect from Oregon. And then how does that room come together with Connor Soley and Jeffrey Bossa and then Jamal Hill? How is he moving in his linebacker body now? I think that's got to be a big part of where things are interesting. And then the coverage, like you said, the coverage has to be there because it really wasn't last year, and Oregon got dissected in the middle of that defense.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued as to how much we'll see Devin Jackson because he's made some spot appearances, or he made some spot appearances last year. He redshirted, and he's again a pretty highly touted recruit coming out of high school, out of Omaha, and has got really high end speed. And I think this could be a year for him. I think this could be an opportunity for him with Keith Brown, and now Harrison Taggart leaving via the portal. The opportunity is there for Devin Jackson to claim a role on this year's team and then be a leading linebacker going into the 2024 season, right? And kind of be on track to be a big time contributor for the Ducks, because right now I think you'd probably predict the two deep, or at least I would, as Justin Jacobs as one starter, Jeffrey Bossa as the other. Jamal Hill is in there as well, probably Connor Soley from Arizona State. Those are probably your top four in a 4-2-5. Of course, that's what the quote unquote two deep looks like. But you toss an injury in there, which happens every year, especially in football. Is Devin Jackson kind of that next guy up? And is he making the strides that he needs to in terms of understanding the defense and being physically ready, being in the weight room and on the right eating plan and sticking to it and all that sort of stuff? Is he making those sorts of strides to become the player that we think he can be? I think we just haven't gotten that much information on him at this point in time, and he's a bit of an enigma in that sense, but I love his upside. I liked him coming out of high school, and I think there is an opportunity there. Soley is a guy that could very well be a player, but I don't think he's, cemented into a role necessarily. Like if Devin Jackson comes in and really impresses in spring football and fall camp, I could see him passing Soley on the depth chart. He's not someone who, lit the world on fire at Arizona State. I think he's one of those transfers who comes in and he's a depth piece. I think that's kind of the perception of him right now. That might change after the spring game or after spring football wraps up, but I think that's very fluid. And when you also consider that one of the guys we're thinking would be ahead of Devin Jackson on the depth chart is Jamal Hill, who's making the transition down to linebacker, I don't think that's a given either. Right? I think they took him out of the safety room because they feel like they have better players there, and he's more well-suited to play linebacker, which I agree with, but that's an adjustment. That's a new position. It's a lot of things for him to learn. So I think there's opportunities for this depth chart to be really, really fluid as time goes on. And that's why I'm going to be watching them and the rest of the defense so closely. Is, the only guys I feel pretty solid about are Jacobs and Bossa. And by the way, Jeffrey Bossa has to get a lot better too. I don't think he's locked into a starting spot. I think he's a likely candidate because he's got a lot of great physical traits, but he struggled big time last year, and he's got to take another step forward to really solidify himself as a starting linebacker on this team, because he wasn't great in coverage last year and he made some individually good plays, but he also consistently struggled against the run, where he was not, PFF graded him as like one of the lowest rated linebackers in the conference a season ago. And part of it was he was just a little bit small, but he's put on some weight, and I'm interested to see what kind of player he can still become, because I still like his upside and potential, but he's got to put in the work, and he's got to improve, and he's got to realize it.
Final note here on the linebackers, then I want to wrap with some more DB talk with you, Spencer. I know we got to get you out of here. Given how thin the inside linebacker room is now following the transfers of Keith Brown and then Harrison Taggart, the latest on Wednesday, I'm not saying this with any kind of intel or sources specifically, but I'd be very surprised if Oregon doesn't already have some guys that are going to come in, at least one, maybe from the portal. You got Jerry Mixon from the 23 class who's enrolled early in the spring and going through practice, but I just don't see how Oregon could see themselves getting that thin at the position without having some moves that they're ready to make. We'll see, though. We'll see how the group looks.
But I think it depends on how they're assessing the talent there. Because, I mean, if you feel confident you can go 5 deep when you only have 2 on the field at any point in time defensively, I think that's enough. I think that's enough to give you depth and competition. And I think it's also enough to survive attrition if injuries come to pass. So I don't feel like they need more. I mean, think about the linebacking room last year. Who played a lot, right? Who played significant, meaningful snaps? Noah Sewell, Jeffrey Bassa, Justin Flo, Keith Brown. Am I missing one in there?
Jackson LeDuc every now and then.
Jackson LeDuc. Okay, there's 5. I feel like the 5 guys you have there are I think that's enough, especially when you have, a true freshman coming in if you absolutely needed him to. But I feel like 5 is enough. Maybe they could add a transfer in there, but I don't think it's a need necessarily.
Okay, yeah, no, maybe we just don't agree on that point, but that's all right. That's what we're here for, the lively discussion. I think maybe you just want to add a little bit more depth there. But yeah, just to wind things down, Spencer, on the DBs. I'm not so much interested in the safety room, even though there's some new pieces with Ty Sheem and Evan. But I think that I'm more confident that that'll get sorted out than I am about the cornerback room right now. But they added a couple of really talented and promising young guys in that 23 class. Cole Martin, who players are saying as a spitting image of Demetrius Martin. He's a guy who comes in from Basha High School as one of the twitchiest athletes out west. He's already there, and you got Solomon Davis from Charter Oak out here in Southern California, Covina. So I'm just really stoked to see what that group can do at corner. And then Kyrie Jackson said he's not trying to be Gonzo 2.0, more or less. He's like, I'm trying to take on the lockdown corner role, but add my own swag to it. And Coach Meat was saying that he was a good addition for them because he has some of that familiarity in the system. And he was saying that he has a little bit more flexibility and freedom than he did at Alabama just since he's been at Oregon. So that cornerback room is going to need to take a step forward for sure. And I think that part of that really gets started here in the spring game. And then what kind of growth has Jaleel Florence taken? How much more comfortable is he looking in year 2? A whole bunch of talent, but a lot of question marks right now, especially at corner for Oregon.
Yeah, I think that you don't need to improve the corner room overall. You need to improve half the corner room, and you need to try and rekindle the success you had in the other half of it, right? Because Gonzo is going to be a top 10 pick tonight in the NFL draft, most likely. He will not fall past 13. I don't think he falls out of there. I think he probably goes top 10. A lot of places have him number 1 corner coming off the board. So you can't get much better than that. So you're trying to replace that as much as you can. The other corner position, definitely you'd like to see some more lockdown ability and a little bit more consistency on that front. But I think you've got a sufficient amount of depth to be able to let those guys go out there and compete for the spot and see who rises to the top, right? One guy's going to push the other, and he's going to push the other guy. And I mean, it's not going to be handed, I don't think, to anyone. And look, if Kyrie Jackson feels he can be a lockdown corner, hey, that would be fantastic. And if you told me it was him and Triquez Bridges and then Jaleel Florence and Dante Manning are rotating as your number 3 corner out there, I think that's a perfectly viable option for the Ducks. But I'm very much intrigued to see how that room and how that position group develops, because I think you have more than enough bodies in there to compete with one another and more than enough talent to have success.
Lots of good stuff there, Spencer. And if you guys want more good stuff, I'll tell you what you should do. You should go check out Spencer and I's latest episode over on Locked On Ducks on his channel. Tons of really good recruiting scoop and analysis from him and I ahead of a massive recruiting weekend.
Big visitor list. We break down the whole. We go through the whole list of guys who are expected to be there, who the priorities should be, what the recruiting's looking like, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I could talk recruiting literally the entire day. So go check that out if you haven't already. And then I'm going to have my own episode previewing the recruiting weekend, hopefully on the Ducks Dish podcast. But Spencer, before we get you out of here, got to give you a chance to plug everything. Where can people find more of you and what you have going on?
I am on Twitter at Smalls_55, and I host Locked On Ducks and Locked On Pac-12 as well, Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Hit me up, shoot me a message. Love hearing from all of you out there. Many of you watch Max's or listen to Max's show. I know listen to mine as well. We appreciate all of you out there. Thrilled as always to be a part of the Duck community. And gosh, everybody enjoy the spring game. Show up to Austin Stadium. Make it loud. Make it a great spectacle as always. And Max, great to be on with you.
Appreciate you coming by, Spencer, talking some Ducks. If you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at mtorresports and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres, looking to grow the community here. And you can find all my latest written content covering the Ducks on the recruiting trail, on the gridiron, every now and then on the hardwood. But I focus on football and recruiting above all else. So appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to talk some Ducks with us. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.